Tonight on Hoosier Football Tailgate, the future of college football may be changing right in front of us. The SEC and Big Ten continue to gain more power, more money, and more influence, while college sports leaders and lawmakers debate antitrust protections, revenue sharing, and even collective bargaining. The House settlement approved in June of 25 cleared the way for direct athlete revenue sharing, with an annual cap expected around the $20.5 million per school and rise year after year. And if the current structure continues to break down, more leaders are openly discussing new governance models beyond the NCAA, including stronger central control, changes to enforcement, and possible congressional action. Recent reporting has tied these debates directly to the antitrust exemption proposals and the question on whether players should have a collective bargaining agreement and remain classified as students. Then after that, we're going to close down the portal series tonight with the final two defensive additions from Notre Dame. Josh Burnham, an outside linebacker type defensive end rusher who is a really good ball player, steady Eddie, and also a defensive lineman from Tulsa, Joe Yelli. Big fella, 300 plus pounds. We're going to get that going here in a minute. But welcome in to everybody. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. This is the Hoosier Tailgate live here on thehoosier.com. Glad to have you with us tonight as we wrap up our series on portal editions. We've covered a lot of new faces here that are helping shape Indiana's roster. And tonight we finish with two more of those pieces on the defensive front. Before we get there, though, I want to begin with a bigger college football story because this affects every Big Ten school, including Indiana. And the story is simple. Who is really going to govern college football moving forward? And that is a question that I think everybody wants to know because the NCAA right now seems to be losing the proverbial power each day as we go along here tonight. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see. When you step back and look at the landscape, it's hard to deny the NCAA has lost a tremendous amount of practical control over the biggest issues in college sports. Conference control, the money, the college football playoff is driven by the conference powers. NIL changes and athletic compensation models rule the day, and the House settlement accelerated the move into a direct revenue sharing. The settlement was approved last June and requires NCAA paying nearly $2.8 billion back in damages over a 10-year period while allowing schools to share direct revenue with athletes under a capped system. So when you hear people say the NCAA is losing control, that's just not a hot take. That's rooted in what has already happened. The old model is gone, and now the question becomes what replaces it? And that's going to be a big aspect of things here over the next few weeks is how does that all play out in that respects? And when you look at some of the dynamics over the years and how the NCAA has kind of lost some of this power, you kind of look at it and see back in 2010 when they signed the big TV contracts, everything started to shift. And then the Supreme Court's big ruling that allowed the limitations on the NCAA, found out that price fixing violates antitrust rules, strip future antitrust protection, and so forth and so on. So it's one of those things that has been slowly happening over time. But the reality of it is right now, I think everybody's in a situation where it's not going to get better anytime soon. It's probably going to get a little uglier, and that's just the space that we're going to live in for a while until they get all this situated. But we'll find out with that as well. Remember, tonight we want you to fully participate. I know we've got the NCAA tournament going on, but we got some things to go through here because Indiana spring practice starts a week from today, the 26th of March. I believe there's spring break this week, and then they come back and have a couple days, and then March 26th, they get everything kicked off. Remember, April 1st is when they'll have the NFL Pro Day here on campus, and that'll be a pretty interesting dynamic as you're going to have a lot of NFL teams, front office staff, head coaches on campus to look at some of these Indiana Hoosiers that have improved their draft stock since the end of the season. And it'll be really interesting to see how they all space out in all this. I'm interested to see where Kaylon Black is fitting into the hierarchy. There's been some things written on about him of most recently and how he has kind of gone under the radar a little bit. So we'll be interesting to see his status when that rolls around. When you think about the Big Ten and the SEC and the power shift, when you ask what replaces it, two conferences immediately sit at the center of that conversation, and that is the SEC and the Big Ten. Why? Because the power college football follows money, television value, playoff influence, and brand strength. And right now, you got to say the SEC and the Big Ten have the most powerful influence when it comes to brand awareness, playoff influence, and so forth and so on. That's why there's so much attention right now on whether these leagues eventually push towards a new governance structure. Yahoo just reported in January that some leaders inside the SEC and elsewhere were already discussing the possibility of alternative governance models in the current enforcement structure if fails to hold. That doesn't mean a formal breakaway has happened. It has not, but the discussion is very real. And the Indiana fans, that matters because if the sport ever moves into a more clearly defined power structure, the Big Ten is already in the room. So that's one thing to look at it from that perspective, is that while Indiana is had a years and years of, kind of a bottom dwelling football team, the last 2 years has really raised their brand awareness. And of course, the national championship this year, you got SIG going to drive the pace car around for the Indianapolis 500. I don't know what other requests that SIG has gotten. I'm sure it's been a pretty good chunk of it. But right now, Indiana's brand is one of the hottest things going out there in the sports world when you think about it. And that's going to be a situation that Indiana has got to exploit and take advantage of, because this may be the only time for them to step to the forefront in all this discussions that are taking place. And I do think Indiana does have a great opportunity there. If things go that way, then Indiana's in a position to be a big part of that discussion. And that's really all that matters in all this. So I do think Indiana is one of those teams that will definitely benefit from some of this situations with the power struggles that be. And we'll figure it all out here when we get into it. But, now here's where it gets interesting with this collective bargaining and antitrust. There's two major legal and structural ideas that's hanging over the future of college sports right now. Number one is the antitrust exemption, which the SCORE Act by Congress, which is trying to get passed right now, would have something of that in there. And number two, collective bargaining, because that's another one. But with that collective bargaining, there has to be something in there that keeps players from being recognized as employees of the university. And that's something that you don't want to have. On the antitrust side, the lawmakers and college sports leaders continue to debate whether the NCAA and schools should receive limited legal protection so they can create things like salary caps, transfer restrictions, NIL guardrails, I should say, without getting hit by more lawsuits. CBS Sports reported just this week that the SCORE Act would give that antitrust protection tied to those kinds of guardrails, although it still lacks a major traction in Washington. And that's the one thing, is that there are still some obstacles in front of that legislation right now, a lot having to do with input from the athletes themselves, which I'm not quite sure why that is a holdup, but for whatever reason, it has been an issue in discussing the possibility of this passing. And I guess I can get it because, you want to have all the players in the room and get everybody's insight and on that. It's going to be a thing that ultimately I hope that we can get beyond and get moving. But, When you look at the model itself, kind of there on the screen, you got the Players Association College Football League and then negotiated agreements, and that's the caps, the rev share, and all those things that go with it. And it's just another dynamic that ultimately you're going to have to, if you're going to have collective bargaining, you're going to have some type of, another structure of player union that represents them, just kind of like the NFL's player union. On the other side, there are growing discussions about the collective bargaining, meaning athletes could eventually have more formal representations in negotiating the rules around compensation, roster structures, and movement. ESPN reported in late of last year that the athletic directors were already weighing collective bargaining as one possible answer to the legal chaos surrounding enforcement and rev share. And I don't doubt it. I mean, that would give a more equal basis for some of this at the ground level. But again, it still comes back to the legislative aspect of things and ultimately who's going to enforce it. Because right now, that's the thing with the NCAA. I think the NCAA is slowly but surely losing its grasp, especially in football, of being the legislative body that can control or have control of especially the sport of football, because every time they do something that violates a potential rule that was put in place years ago, they're going to get sued. And that's the possibility. That's the thing with this is that the NCAA is rules that they have on the books per se are not relative to today's landscape, and they're still trying to govern by the old rules per se. That's the big thing. And like I said, that's the tension point. Congress could step in, give broad antitrust protection. Some believe schools could impose stronger system-wide rules. If that does not happen, pressure grows for some kind of bargaining structure with the athletes. Either way, the current system feels unstable, and that's what I meant. We're in a situation, and even the SEC Commissioner, Greg Stanke, said this week, is that for right now, with what we have, is the best we have, and it's going to look ugly for a while until some things come about and they're able to get their hands wrapped around all this, because right now we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. But yeah, Yelli, that's what I said, didn't I? I think I said that. It said in my pronunciation, it sounds like jelly, but it's Yelli. So the H is silent, I guess. Okay, good. I want to make sure there because I practiced that one because I looked at that and I was like, oh man, I'm not ever going to get this one. But anyway, I think I got her right tonight. So, but he's a big fella. We're going to get to him here in a second. When you think about this aspect of things, talking about super leagues as well, could the Big Ten and the SEC just kind of take over? And you take the ACC and the Big 12 and you kind of group those between the Big 10 and the SEC? I don't think so. The only schools that would be in jeopardy of getting left behind a little bit in all of this is going to be the group of 5 schools. That's going to be something that's not going to be avoidable. And in my opinion, the group of 5 should have their own tier of national championship that they ultimately play for on the structure that they see fit with, because I think that would be something that would benefit them and potentially monetarily as well. When you talk about those group of 5 school, when you talk about what does this mean for Indiana per se, I said earlier, the good news is for Hoosier fans is college football keeps separating into more defined tier. Indiana is one of the 2 safest places it can possibly be, the Big Ten, like I said. That doesn't guarantee success, of course, but it does mean Indiana has access to the table, the money, and the structure that will shape the next era of the college football sport itself, per se. While some programs around the country may be asking where they'll get left out, or will they get left out, Indiana's challenge is different. The challenge for Indiana is that now that they're in the room, can you build a strong roster enough to compete in that room? And I think the answer to that question is definitely yes, because I think Sig has proven that over the last 2 years that he's able to construct a roster that can compete against anyone and everyone on any given Saturday. And he did it again this year and won a big time, won the championship in that respect. So we'll see. John says, 2 guys I'm looking forward to see are Brian Baldwin and Jade Williams at linebacker. No question. There's some of these young guys that are definitely going to kind of be lying in the weeds per se. They're just chomping at their bit for the opportunity there, John. And I don't question where they're going to get a great opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And Preston is a fast young man. I said this on Jim Cole's show this morning, that if you're not excited about Indiana's wide receiver room or running back room, there's something wrong with you, because the talent that's in those two rooms right now is unbelievable. You got Nick Marsh, you got Charlie Becker, you got Preston, you got Tyler Morris. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable to see the talent that trots out there at those two positions, not just in the spring, but come fall in that return. And, from that standpoint. Now let's talk about this structure here as it pertains to the portal. And, that's kind of the biggest thing is, Indiana's done a great job of building their roster with the portal per se. And tonight we've got to get into our last 2 here as we get ready for these last 2 defensive players before we turn our sights to the spring practice here a week from today, I believe the 26th. And, that's one thing that's been pretty nice for Indiana right now is what they have in the young guys that they're bringing up through the system, bringing in that foundation, and then intermixing these kids out of the portal. It just adds another mixture to that, those rooms, offense and defensively, that only is going to strengthen them. And that's the key component, is you want a strong room with all that, and that per se, because it gives you the competition you need each and every day. And you want to get your best 11 on the field when you start playing ball games. And that's the way you do it, is through competition. And when you have competition in the room, it makes everybody better. And that's been one thing that has hurt Indiana over the years per se, is they may have not had all that great competition in the room to keep pushing those upper level athletes in those position rooms, because they lacked overall talent in those rooms. And then you get complacent. And when you get complacent, bad habits set in. And that's one thing that Sig's pretty good at, is not letting complacency step in and take a rule over anything when it comes to that stuff. So when we step back here, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about Mr. Burnham, the young man out of Notre Dame. He's a redshirt senior, so you do believe he's got this year and next year left. And we'll take a good hard look at him all right here on Hoosier Football, live on the Hoosier.com.
Hoosier fans, listen up. This is the coach, Shannon Griffith. And if you're gearing up for the game day or gearing...
Hoosier fans, take a moment and soak this in. Indiana is national champions, history made, banners raised, a season we'll talk about forever. And now it's time to wear the moment. Head to My Fanatics store and grab the official Indiana Hoosiers national championship gear. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, and championship designs built for fans who lived every snap, every fourth down, every win. This is authentic Fanatics gear, not knockoffs. Designed to last, comfortable, and ready to rep anywhere you go. Whether you're at the game, around town, or watching next season, knowing who sits on top, this is how you show it. Supplies won't last forever, and once it's gone, it's gone. So don't wait. Hit the Hoosier Tailgate Fanatics store, lock in your Indiana National Champions gear, and wear it with pride, because this championship is forever.
Hoosier fans, listen up. If you're serious about the Hoosiers, the Hoosier.com is where you need to be. We're talking insider reporting, film breakdowns, recruiting, and transfer portal coverage you won't get anywhere else. And when you subscribe, it's more than just one site. You also get full access to Rivals, On3, and The Athletic at no extra cost. Right now, you can jump in for just $1. Then it renews annually at the regular rate. $1. Total access. No brainer. Head to thehoosier.com and join today.
Welcome back to Hoosier Football Tailgate Live here tonight on thehoosier.com. Remember, you can get over to the Hoosier.com, pick up that subscription. You got a lot of opportunities there. There's a ton of information on there, and there's some things that we got to catch up on here on the tailgate. Part of it's recruiting, because Indiana has got a great list of kids on campus during the spring that are 4 or 5 star rated kids that are going to make a trip to Bloomington, and Indiana is in the mix for opportunities to secure these kids out of the 27 class. So we got some things there to catch up on as well when we get things rolling here with spring practice and such. So get over there today, get your subscription. There's a ton of stuff up there right now. Of course, the basketball season just ended. There's a lot of information up there, as well as some good articles by Zach Browning, especially about Indiana's offense and kind of what to expect. That will be the other aspect of things that we'll be able to cover as well here on the tailgate, because you got a lot of new bodies coming in, and plus the bodies that got coming back. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see. Let's see here before we get on to Burnham here. BB looked good before he got, no question about his ability. I think he was a guy that I would love to see get opportunities throughout the year. But again, hopefully he's back to 100%, and he can go through the spring and at least get some work done, because he did have that breakaway speed that Indiana did not quite have a year ago. Will LeBron Bond get a chance to play this year? He made high school in Norfolk very proud. I think David, he's a young pup. And sometimes for the young pups, it's hard for them to have patience and some of those things, because they may feel they're ready, but the reality of it is they're not quite ready. But I do think there's going to be a lot of those guys that are going to get opportunities this spring to show where they're at in their maturity level and kind of where they stack up, especially at spots where there are vacancies to go compete for a job. And I do think that you're going to see some of those guys get opportunities, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised with some of them if they don't take the bull by the horn and get that opportunity. But we'll have to wait and see with all that. It's the tricky part of young pups, you want them, they want to play right away, which you can't blame them for that. But, that's where you got to have patience, especially a patience with the teams like Indiana has now. When you win national championships and stuff, the old Indiana, when you had these young pups, if you didn't play them early on, chances are they were going to transfer out, because they weren't going to sit around to not even get to go to a bowl game. You look at Ohio State, they very, very seldom they'd lose kids to transfer, because they're willing to bide their time there, because they knew by the time they got to their junior and senior seasons, they were going to have a chance to potentially play for a Big Ten championship and a national championship. And that's some of the things that's turning in Indiana's favor right now, if they can keep doing what they've been doing. So I do think those young guys are going to get opportunities. We'll have to see with all that and everything. Todd, appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in tonight on a basketball night, as the tournament is underway. Wisconsin and VCU already cost me my dollars for today, so not happy about Wisconsin. They blew it. That was a tough game. But High Point, you got to give them credit. Those kids battled. They battled and made it happen in that respects. Let's get on with Mr. Josh Burnham, kid out of Notre Dame. Physically, a good-looking kid. Looks the part, as we would say, about 6'3", 6'4", put good size on him, and he gives Indiana another body to come off the edge. I think if you had to compare him, he's kind of like Kellen Wyatt, with the one exception is this kid can go out and play in space. So he could actually be that quote unquote outside linebacker type that can come up and put his hand in the ground and be a pass rusher. That's the type of player this kid is. Got a really good motor. I like his frame. I like his movement. I think he plays with some aggressiveness, and I see his value to this team in a lot of different ways. And when you talk about that, because he does have an explosive first step, he can play, like I said, he can play down or stand up and do it, and he gives you another pass rusher, and especially in situations as well, because you can put him out there in special situations and turn him loose. That's the one thing, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. That's going to be a very competitive defensive line room. That's no question about it. There's a lot of guys that are going to have a lot of different opportunities. And the one thing that you got to like about the D line aspect is Indiana should be able to play anywhere from 8 to 9 guys up front. That's huge, because when you can keep guys fresh, that's when they cause offenses all types of problems. And I think that's what we saw a year ago, when you had a guy like Tyrese Tucker who comes into games and would make big plays because the other team was tired, and Tuck come in and he's ready to, tear down the wall per se. And even Landino for that fact. But again, this kid, I think, is a good player, a solid, smart player, going to play within the system. And he's going to be one of those guys that adds depth to the room, especially with his flexibility and what he does. I just think his upside, along with what he can do, is a huge get for them. And that's one of the things that I liked about him. And I'm going to pull up some of his tape here so we can get a quick look at him here. Get over to the Quick Cut video analysis software here, if I can, real quick. So let's go to my video. And okay, here we go. All right, here we're going to get into this here. Let me get over to the video room per se. There we go. Kind of a highlight tape. He's number 40, so you'll get a chance to see him here and how he shows up. He's down here at the bottom, 5 technique at the bottom. You can see he does a good job of getting extension, keeping his outside arm free, and then he's able to make the tackle. That's what you like to see from a guy on the defensive line. He was able to lock it out, but keep his outside arm free. And then when the play came to him, he was able to make the play. Again, he's down here at the bottom. Let me point him out to you. He's right here at the 5 technique position. And again, taking on the blocker here, putting himself in the best possible position, and he's able to, again, get over to the outside and come in and make the play on that. Good old Boston College. Now you get to see him stand up. So now he's out here in space. That's the thing that I said, like he can come off the edge, he can put his hand down in it and everything. Let's see here what the question is here. Todd has, whoops. Being deep on the line will hopefully enable. Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about what that creates for other opposing offenses is when you got a fresh defensive line and you can roll that 7 to 8 guys consistently, it ultimately pays dividends for you. It's going to be one of those things that I think is going to be an awesome situation. Why did Burnham? I don't know the reasons in that regard. It could have been a situation where Maybe they told him that his opportunities were going to decrease, but again, I have no outstanding knowledge of why. But again, you get to see him here at the top, fight through, and then be able to be in a position to make the play in space. And you got to like that because, again, it gives you the flexibility with him to play him in different ways. Now he's at the top with his hand in the ground, coming off the edge there. Good swim move. And again, makes the play. Sets the tackle up, spins, and makes the play. And like I said, he's a guy that I'm going to say he's not going to give you a lot of flash per se. I think he's going to give you a lot of consistency at that position, as we see him here again, playing the 5 technique here at the bottom. Keeps his arms free. I done that there. This is Turbo he's up against here. You like to see him run through the tackle instead of just reaching for the tackle, because that sometimes can be a problem in that respect. And again, get to see him here again in the situation, playing in the trenches, and he's in there to make a play. And that's the one thing that you got to like about this kid is coming off the edge down here at the bottom now. He's just got a great motor. And that's why I think he reminds me a little bit of Wyatt from the standpoint is he overly flashy? No. But does the kid make plays? Yes. He makes some plays. And that's what Wyatt did for Indiana and what you saw in film when he was coming from Maryland. There wasn't a lot there from Maryland that was going, wow, this kid's a dynamite player, but I thought it was a steal for Indiana a year ago. And unfortunately got hurt, but this kid, I think, is in that same light. Here you get a chance to see him run here. He's running a twist at the bottom here, and he's right there in the middle of the field, and he's out here on the run being able to make the play. And, you got to like his effort there. And that's the one thing I think you get from this kid is honest effort and a motor that never quits in that respect, because he's the type of guy that he's going to give you everything he's got. And that's why I think Indiana got a good player because of what he brings to the table. Why he left Notre Dame, no idea. Why he left Notre Dame. Could be the situation like Coogan. Maybe he's not going to have the opportunity to play as much because they're going to go with a younger lineup in that position. But again, whatever that scenario is, Indiana's coaches have a good eye. And I think they saw something here in this kid with what they want in that respect. So I think that's why here. John, we lost a lot when Wyatt and Daly. Yeah, no question. Wyatt especially. You lost Wyatt, was that Oregon, I believe. We lost him at that time. And that wasn't a good scenario for him. And, that was one thing that it came about there is, when you lose him, it hurts a little bit in that respect. One thing I do want to do is make sure I get in the chat tonight, the different links to the stores and stuff. I do thank you if you've purchased something from the store, the Fanatic store. I appreciate that a bunch. And again, there's still some of the championship stuff as well as regular stuff there. And that will take you over there to see what's on there. And if there's something you like, by all means, I hope you can pick it up. But those that have purchased some stuff, I appreciate it for your kindness in that regard. And but there's that, as well as getting over to the Hoosier.com. Now we got to go to the big fella, because this man is a big human being. He was a guy that, in a lot of ways, he was not a starter or an every down player for Tulsa this past year. He was a guy that was a depth guy. He'll be a depth guy for Indiana, the guy that's going to be potentially behind Tucker or those interior guys because of, his size and stuff. And, that's the one thing about this kid that you get from him. He's a big, strong kid. He's a 300-pounder. He runs pretty good for a big fella. He was at Iowa junior college before he went to Tulsa. I do believe it may be in Kevin Wilson that recruited him there at Tulsa. And then now he's coming to Indiana. And you got to again, and I think somebody just said this, the D-line looks absolutely stacked. And I do believe that, again, it's going to be a strong room for Indiana. And that was one thing about last year. And this is the thing when you talk about over time, 2 years that Indiana's, Kit Sig's been here, there was always a concern about depth at the D-line and then, of course, the O-line. And that's always been a question mark for Indiana. Last year, it wasn't. And you saw why you needed it because you lost some bodies in there, Wyatt and Daly. And there were some guys on the offensive line that got dinged up and weren't able to play. And they had to rely upon a backup or two. And that's going to be a huge benefit. And that's going to come into place this year. As we know, it's hard to play 12 games as an interior lineman. You're getting beat up every Saturday. And you can do all you want to do in the off season in terms of preparing your body for it. It's just that it's a physical sport and you got to have more than one guy to be able to keep fresh bodies on the field and guys that you can trust to play. And that's why I say a guy may be number 2 on the depth chart, but the reality of it is he's really a starter because those guys are going to play. And that's the one thing that Indiana does a great job of is monitoring snaps as well as getting guys involved. And this kid will be another kid that will give Indiana the opportunity to do that with what he gives them. And Indiana need another interior guy. There's no question about it. And they got some young guys that will be able to see how they have progressed through through the winter months into spring and come out in spring practice. But this cat, I think, is going to be a guy that everybody's going to end up liking quite a bit because he is a big time looking dude when you look at him. And I really liked his film. I like the way, he plays. He's a strong physical guy inside. He's very hard to single block. I know there's a lot of things because he plays the nose in a lot of these clips. And sometimes he's playing a one technique, which he gets double teamed quite a bit. But he's a guy that it's not easy to root out of there. And you need that big body in there to do those things. I mean, that's kind of what Steven was for Indiana. He was just very hard to move out and he could go make a play. And this kid I think has the ability to be a force in the interior, but also be in a position to make plays. And that's what you need out of a D lineman is the ability to go make a play when the opportunity presents itself. And it's not always going to be that easy in some respects, but we'll see here in that stuff. He's number 90 right now. He's right there at the nose position for Tulsa. This is against Memphis last year. This is one of his best games according to his stats in this game. But you can see here, we'll get to the end zone, how he's able to keep pressure on that center's outside shoulder because he's reading zone, but not oversell it to the point that he runs himself out of the play because what they're teaching this center is what I'm guessing here. He's a 2-gap player. He's got to play front side A and backside A. And this is how you do it. When you think about this type of play on outside zone, as you can see here, he's putting himself in a position and then he's able to fall back and make the play for no gain. So that was a really good play there for him in that respects and what we saw there. Now, this time he's the one technique right here. And chances are he'll get double team here in a 4-man front. As you can see there, pass pro. He does pretty good there. What I liked about this one per se wasn't that he, made a big play and stuff. I like the fact that he ran to get his helmet into the pitcher potentially. And that's not always something you get out of D linemen. But I like the fact that they're trying to get bodies to the football. And here's the guy's getting double teamed. He could just given up, but he's, getting off and getting to that next level. And I think that there showed me some of his athleticism, and little bounce in his step. Yes, John, Iowa Western is where he was at. Correct. Again, he's at the one technique here at the 30-yard line. Again, double teamed. Not much he could do here as play away. Now he's right here in the grand scheme of things. Again, double teamed. And that's what he can do. He's not getting rooted out of there. That's the thing you like. He's got some strength, as you can see here. He's got a pretty good pad level. He's getting double teamed. He's putting himself in there, and he's occupying the two guys. And I'll show you from the end zone what his responsibility is on this as he's getting double teamed, because he's ultimately given himself up to protect someone. His responsibility is to take that away, because he's ultimately trying to protect his linebacker here to keep him free to make the play. And if what you'll see on here, by doing what he does here, good pad level, good strike, it keeps him off his linebacker, and the linebacker's in there to make a play. And so that is good, showing from the standpoint that this was his responsibility. He did it very well, and it enabled the guy to make the play that they wanted to make the play. Now he's in a zero technique. Now you're going to get true more, man on man per se. Again, another good job here of two gapping it per se. He's sitting here. There he is on the zero. And now what he's going to do is get a good job here of staying heavy to the outside, but putting himself in a position to get back in there and make the play. And he does a good job there. So he's pretty good at, what they call kind of a two-gap player, understanding that he's strong enough to play the field shoulder, but also strong enough to come back under and make the play, which is another, key thing from it. Memphis had a quarterback, this kid that last year, he was really good. He was a guy that could run the ball pretty well. Same thing here, doing his job and responsibility. I think I've got one of here where he does finally get a sack, but we may not get to it. Boom. There's a good job. This is the one that he does a great job of taking on the double team, splitting it, trying to get his shoulders skinny here and splitting it, which he does. And he's right there to make the play, even when he's down on the ground. That's another key component. So you got to like the way this kid is built. I think he's strong. He's one of those Midwestern kids. I do believe he's from Iowa. And so big and strong, good technique. And you can see he makes some plays here and there. And like I said, he wasn't an every down player for Tulsa. He was a guy that was pretty much a backup, a number two. And he came in and, split half and half his snaps with the guy. And I do believe he's another guy that will have 2 years left in that regard and his eligibility. Let's see here. Let's take this in. Gabe Hill from Naples was supposed to be really, they've got some young kids that are going to be really good. It's just whether or not they're physically ready to go play in that respect. And, it's the greatest thing about that is that the fact a lot of these guys that were in this recruiting class were able to come and enroll the second semester at Indiana. Therefore, they've gone through all the winter workouts. They're now going to go through their first spring football, and it will give them and the coaches a chance to really put their eyes on them to see what they've got, because this will be the first time that the coaches will have an opportunity to work with these true freshmen that are just here right now on campus for the spring. And that's a huge advantage for them. It's a huge advantage, not only for the coaches, but the kids themselves, because you'll get an opportunity to see where these guys stack up. Can they provide depth things of that nature. And that's what spring ball is for, to solidify your top 22, maybe some of your top 3 at positions, and figuring out how what you are as a football team coming out of spring. And what we're going to do next week, after we're done kind of with the players that are going to be involved pretty much all spring. Now, Indiana did add some kickers to the mix. They got an Aussie and a kid from, I think another kid from Hawaii, a punter, and then a long snapper came in as well. But, you got to feel good about this portal class that they brought in. Remember, there's no spring portal class. So this is the only one they have the opportunity to, whoever they went after and got, you got to say that they did a darn good job of it, of targeting guys that not only elevated some of their positions with some of the talent they brought in, Nick Marsh, those type of guys, but also guys that are going to provide them with good X number of plays as a bona fide backup, but will play quite a bit. And that's why these guys like this young man here and Burnham and all that give them. Now, one thing that Sig did say about the Burnham kid, and this goes back to the tight end discussion, and I remember him saying this kind of a tongue in cheek is kind of how he said it, is that he thought Burnham could also be a tight end. So now that doesn't mean he's going to put him over there, but that's one position that there's the biggest question mark heading into the spring, because remember, the Brock Schott kid from Leo High School up here, not going to be able to go in spring, I don't think, because of a foot injury. And he's going to lose those reps. Now, he's there on campus, and he'll participate in what he can, but not going to be ready. So he's going to miss all those reps. And they're going to have a lot of young pups in there this spring taking the snaps at tight end. So that will be an interesting position to keep your eye on. My hope for next week is we'll get ready to go with spring practice. We'll talk about the depth chart per se. Going to try to get Zach Browning on here to get his take on this spring setup with this ball club and what they are going to have to do coming off a national championship. Now they've gone from being the hunter to where they are the hunted. And they're going to have a lot of things that are going to be quote unquote distractions, a little bit more per se than last year's team, because last year's team went out with a chip on their shoulder this year because they got a lot of disrespect in the offseason, basically saying that they didn't belong in the national playoffs. And that was something that they were able to utilize to their advantage. So we'll see how that all plays. We'll get some take on that. And of course, some of the practice stuff that if we can get some information, Sig, he doesn't let the reporters stay for practice. They get 15 minutes per se, and that's about it. Ryan Day lets them stay for the entire practice, but Sig's not that way. So it's kind of a limited number of opportunities where these guys get to see them, but it's only for a 15-minute period, and it really doesn't help in that way. But that doesn't mean we don't have discussion points that we need to talk about, like the tight end position, the quarterback position when it comes to Grant Wilson and Tyler Cherry in that respect. So the linebacker core, with the year that Jonesy had and some of these other guys are going to be some new faces in there. And then, of course, the secondary, because you got Farrell back, you got Sharp back, but you don't have Pons and you don't have Moore. So who are those dynamics? Who's going to be in that mix of things as they head through spring camp and how that's going to shake up? But again, you got to feel good, as did everybody, especially Sports Illustrated, who did put their early estimated number of wins, and Indiana was plus 10, like 10.25, I think. They said over 10 as their number of wins for this year, which is a very good number considering some of the games that they've got. But you got to feel good where Indiana's at, where they're at as a football team, where they're at as a program in general. They're healthy, and things are looking in a positive direction. The best thing to happen now is get through spring practice without any serious injury and get themselves into the summer months ready to roll before they have to kick it off there in August. Well, I appreciate you guys being with me here again tonight on the Tailgate. We'll be back next week. Don't know if we'll hit the two times a week now that we're in the spring practice, but that won't start next week. We'll be back next Thursday night at 7:30 to talk about spring football, depth charts, and hopefully get Zach Browning on from thehoosier.com as well. But until next time, this is Coach Shannon Griffith. You've been watching the Hoosier Tailgate live here on thehoosier.com. Good night, everybody.